been some time since I produced a podcast, and I saw a comment from Mogu Mogu. I've no idea who Mogu Mogu is, but she has left some very encouraging comments in the past, and when I saw them saying, please produce another podcast, I thought, well, yeah, okay, I'll do that, because it's been quite a while since I've produced one. The essence of this podcast is around the notion of pleasure, pain, happiness, as always, I guess. The strapline is that you will never be happy until you realize that you will never be happy. The Buddhists put it a slightly different way. They said all is suffering. And we read things like that, and then we, busily go off trying to find something to titillate or please our sensibilities in some kind of way, looking for pleasure. The very act of looking for pleasure is going to cause you pain. And I've produced articles on the blog. I don't think I did I didn't do a podcast on the topic, but there's an article on the blog about how all spiritual searching and philosophizing is really an attempt to realize some kind of pleasure, or at least get away from pain in some kind of way. People who are looking for liberation, moksha, enlightenment, salvation, whatever, are trying to get away from pain. And I'm not critical of that. It's a natural thing for us to do, although not a particularly helpful thing for us to do. So, Gurdjieff said that man had been programmed to see the world topsy-turvy, upside down. Whatever we think is right is wrong, whatever we think is true is false, and so on and so forth. And in his usual way, he dropped a bombshell with that one, because it's actually very true that we do see the world upside down. And so we believe that the way to become happy is to go seeking pleasure. Well, I hope to show you in this podcast that by going and seeking pleasure, you will make yourself very, very miserable and very unhappy. And that if you can accept in the depths of your being, although that is not a simple thing, that all is suffering, you will find a kind of contentment and joy. So I need to go through something I've covered before in other podcasts, but it's foundational for this particular podcast. You see there a picture of a roller coaster, and this is the pleasure-pain roller coaster. I've mentioned before many times that our primary driver is the survival instinct. When we feel that we are surviving more adequately, we feel pleasure. And it doesn't have to be, I've just escaped from a lion or something. It can be fairly indirect. So, if you win £1 million on the lottery, you're going to feel enhanced. Your survival is going to feel more certain. Of course, you're not going to think about it in those kind of ways, but the body, and it's always in the body, the body will cognize that it is in a more secure situation. If you lose your last $100 and you've got no money, you will definitely sense that you are in a certain an uncertain situation. And that will cause you pain. So the essence of the whole thing, in fact, I may produce a podcast at some point in the future called Existential Calculus, and give the whole thing a bit of a mathematical treatment, because it almost is mathematics. The more your survival is guaranteed, the more strong you feel in life, the more vital. As that increases, and it is the increases that are important. It's not the actual level of survival that you're at, it's whether you experience an increase. So someone who has $1 million will at some point get used to the fact that they've got $1 million, and they'll want $10 million. And getting the $10 million will then make them feel happy for a while, because it's the gradient, it's the difference between where you are and where you get to. So if you have $100 and somebody gives you $1,000, you are going to think all your Christmases have come at once. To someone who has $1 million, give them $1,000 and they might not even say thank you. So we have this roller coaster. As you're going up the roller coaster, increasing in your survival fitness, in whatever way, finding a new mate, getting some money, enjoying a good meal, whatever it is, then the pleasure is increasing. Your power is increasing, to use the words of Spinoza. But there is a problem with this, and a roller coaster has a downside as well as an upside. So the more you go seeking pleasure, the more you are going to line yourself up for pain. So Schopenhauer says somewhere that those who suffer most in life are those who have the strongest desire for pleasures. And of course they are, because life is not going to oblige them always. And not only that, as they climb the gradient up the roller coaster, they're getting nearer and nearer to a point where everything is just going to become a fucking pain to them. So I heard yesterday that one of the founders of Sun Microsystems is trying to sue somebody because he doesn't want people on the beach nearby. I imagine, I don't know what his wealth is, but I imagine it's billions of dollars. And all he's got, in his life is focusing on people who just want to go for a stroll on the beach nearby. And he's trying to get the beach barred to public access. And this is his world, and this causes him to suffer. And, despite all his power and his money, he got to the top of the roller coaster, and the only way that he can go forward now is down, pain. Maybe there's a few finger marks on the dashboard of his car that really piss him off. Or maybe, people walking on the beach nearby, or maybe there are airplanes flying over every 3 weeks, that really piss him off. So this is what happens. No one is free from pain, and particularly those people who seek pleasure. And pleasure is this act of trying to be more fit for survival, a nice meal, delicious sex, whatever. And Spinoza says, and he's very correct, that sensual pleasure is always followed by what he termed deep melancholy, a pain. And in fact, the whole of Spinoza's work really is about how you get out of this pleasure-pain cycle. Well, I'll have more to say about that in a moment. But, if you are seeking pleasure, and you need to look fairly, intelligently at the things that you're doing. So, listening to a podcast like this, is it really just a source of, 10 or 15 minutes pleasure? Because afterwards, maybe you need more pleasure because this one hasn't done it for you, or maybe it does do it for you, but tomorrow you've forgotten all about it and you're feeling a bit pissed off. Whenever you seek pleasure, you will be courting pain, because it's a roller coaster, and it's the differences in movement. So someone who's got very, very bad toothache will feel a sense of relief and pleasure if they take a strong painkiller and the toothache diminishes. It doesn't go away completely, but the pain diminishes, so they feel a sense of pleasure. This is the way it is. I probably will do a podcast at some point on existential calculus. I'm not really sure how popular that would be, but I probably will do it. So, if you look at the whole of life is a striving. It's effort. Your heart beats every second or thereabouts to maintain your existence. If it didn't do that for a few seconds, or for a minute or two, you would be history. So your heart is striving all the time to maintain your existence. Your breathing, you strive to breathe all the time to maintain your existence. You eat most days, probably every 6 or 7 hours, to maintain your existence. You drink, so the whole thing is an effort to maintain your existence. Life is only interested in you living long enough to continue the species. Your lifetime is just long enough to reach a mature age, so say somewhere around 25, 30. Have kids, which takes you up to about 50, and then your health starts to decline, and 20 or 30 years later you're history. So our lifespan is even geared around creating the next generation. It's a futile and vain activity. How that came about, I've no idea. Natural selection selects the strongest, and therefore we end up with the most cunning and the strongest creatures at the top of the chain. Anyway, pleasure and pain is what drives us to continue with this kind of circus, this propagation of the species for seemingly no end whatsoever, other than the next generation generates the generation after that, and so on and so forth. And pleasure and pain make sure that we are driven along to do this. So if you want to step out of the pleasure and pain cycle, you have to experience profound disappointment with life. It was Gurdjieff who said this. He said, no one's going to be interested in his kind of work unless they are profoundly disappointed with life. And I should add that the Gurdjieff work is a hornet's nest. Enter at your own risk, because Mr. Gurdjieff undoubtedly was a very influential and profound man. What he left behind was a mixture of sycophants through to people who believe they're superior to everybody else. And many of the most unpleasant comments I've had on my channel have come from Gurdjieff groupies. They don't like being told that Mr. Gurdjieff was not God. He wasn't always right. I got that from people who knew him. These people who are the sycophants have read a book or two and believe that they somehow become superior to the rest of us. Anyway, before I get onto a rant in that one, but profound disappointment. So this realization that chasing after pleasure, and that no matter what you do, it will cause you suffering. Producing this podcast will cause me suffering. At least the minimum suffering will. I'll put it up there. A pile of people will look at it, and I'll be wanting 100,000 people to look at it, and maybe after a month or two, 1,000 people have looked at it, and there's a sense of wanting more. I'm like the guy who's got $1,000 and believes he would be happy if he gets $1 million, and then when he gets $1 million, he wants $10 million, and so on. We're all like it. So by producing this podcast, I'm setting myself up for a certain amount of pain. Disappointment that I'm not as popular as Eckhart Tolle or whoever else sells what are essentially tranquilizer videos on YouTube. To round this off, let me try and summarize what I've been rambling about for the past 15 minutes. If you can truly realize that everything you do will either be pain or will cause pain, you will not be so keen to go chasing after pleasures. Spinoza was wholly on the nail when he said, sensual pleasure is always followed by a sense of melancholy. In other words, you have to come down the other side of the roller coaster. If you want some contentment and peace in your life, then you have to have been profoundly disappointed with everything. Everything. If there's one thing that you go chasing after, you are setting yourself up for pain. And in Schopenhauer's words, the one mistake we make in life, the central mistake, is to believe that life should be pleasurable. Voltaire said, pain is real, pleasure is an illusion. Pain is real. If you can accept that you will always be in some kind of pain, then you will experience some kind of contentment and happiness. Strange situation, isn't it? But that's the way it works. So you will never be happy until you realize that you will never be happy. And on that note, I'll end. So I hope you found that useful.